Well, what I'm going to do is I'm going to throw out some scriptures, and we'll talk about a little bit about what's been happening in the Middle East and how it relates to some of the things we've been discussing. And I think that a good place to start is Yechezkel, Ezekiel 38 and 39. That seems like a pretty good place to start. And the word of Yahweh came to me saying, 38:1. Ben Adam, set your face against Gog, the land of Magog, the chief leader of Meshach and Tubal, which could be Turkey and southern Russia, but northern Turkey, southern Russia, the Islamic States. Prophesy, this says the Master Yahweh, I am against you, O Gog, chief leader of Meshach and Tubal. And then we have the Islamic end time conspiracy. Verse 4, I will turn you around and put hooks into your jaws. I will bring you out with all your army, horses and horsemen. Verse 4, Ezekiel 38. Clothed with all sorts of armor, even a great company of armor, shields, handling swords. Persia, that's Iran. Ethiopia, in this context, is Sudan. It is not Ethiopia in Africa, it is Sudan. Libya and all them. Gomer, that is, according to Josephus, Turkey, and the house of Togarmah, the seed of Satan, which, as we know from past studies, is Turkey, the north quarters, all the units. Many nations come against Israel in the latter days. So, what do I do? Well, I'll share some thoughts. How about if I just share some thoughts with you? Okay? And then if you have a question, we really have never done this on a Shabbat. Okay? I guess it's the first time for everything. You'll have a chance to ask a specific question about the current situation in the Middle East. How about if we do something like that? So, for clarification and for those kind of purposes. So, but this may only be 1 week, so take your shot and let's see if we can. What I see happening in the Middle East right now on our televisions, I see several things. The first thing I see is that the beast is being unmasked. Amen? We are in the middle of World War III, big time. The battle that's taking place now in and around Israel is one of the battles of World War III. Okay, it's one of the early battles of World War III. One of the first battles of World War III, or the initial shots of World War III, were fired during 9/11. I see 9/11 as the first shots of World War III. And then all the other things subsequent to 9/11 have been other shots or skirmishes in this end-time battle of the Islamic Confederacy, the Confederacy of Islam, versus the ships of Kittim, or the Western Confederacy of the United States, Europe, and their allies, all the ships and the airships and the warships west of Cyprus, or the island of Kittim. So I see the world divided into two camps, these two camps. And I think that everything that's happening is actually a result of being aligned either with the Islamic Confederacy or with the camps of Kittim, the Western Alliance, of which Israel, of course, is also part of the Western Alliance. I think the skirmishes we see now and the battle we see raging now is due to several things. And again, a lot of what I'm sharing with you is my opinion, but you asked for it, so I'm going to give it to you. Okay? I gave you a choice. And I don't like opinions, I like the word. So, but these are current events, all right? So, I see that when Ariel Sharon withdrew from the Gaza Strip, let me see if I can get rid of this feedback here, if I don't get too hot. When Ariel Sharon got rid of withdrew from the Gaza Strip, I should say, that opened up the opportunity for Hamas to create a launching pad from which to attack Israel. At the time, it was a good move. It was a very good move. Idealistically, it was a fantastic move. Because historically, the Gaza Strip never belonged to Israel. Now, there are a few scriptures that indicate that Judah settled in Gaza, or in biblical Asa. Okay? And we know that Philip preached in Asa, or Gaza. But other than that one reference to the fact that Gaza, or Asa, was settled by the tribe of Judah when they entered the land in the days of Yehoshua. other than that one reference, there's not a lot of very strong case. Let me move this sucker down here so I'm not, doesn't mess up the noise on the mic. A very strong case can be made that Gaza never belonged to the Jewish people anyway, although it was given as part of the tribal allotment by Yahweh to the people of Israel, for sure. So when Ariel Sharon withdrew from Gaza, the problem is it created this void, this vacuum, which is filled by Hamas and the terrorist leadership. And it became a launching pad to launch missiles against Israel. That was another one of these conflicts between the Islamic beast and the people of Israel. Getting back to the situation in Gaza, idealistically, it was a good move because Rabbi Meir Kahane, many of you have heard of Rabbi Meir Kahane, the founder of the Jewish Defense League. They called him a nut, a meshugana, and somebody who should be locked up basically in a mental institution. Because his radical idea was to deport all the Muslims out of the so-called Palestinian occupied territories, the West Bank, Gaza, and so forth. And to repatriate them and to pay them, or give them reparations, I should say, to pay them like $30,000 or $50,000, whatever, per family, American dollars, to move out. So that what you would be left with is primarily a Jewish state. Because you can't have a Jewish state with 4 million Islamic citizens and 2 million Jews. You can't have a Jewish state, correct? Would you all agree with that? So if you have a greater population of Arabs or Muslims, they're mostly Muslims, now all Arabs are Muslims, but most are, you can't have a Jewish state. So the idea was, look, let's take these Arabs / Muslims and let's send them outside of Israel and settle them, build houses, take care of their families, treat them well, don't mistreat them, treat them well. But get them out, because they multiply quicker than the people of Israel. So if a Muslim family has 5 or 6 children and the Jewish family has 2 children, the demographics are not in favor of the Jewish people. So the plan was good, but in return they called him a militant, they called him a nut, they called him somebody who should be locked up for his radical political views, and that was Rabbi Meir Kahane. So he was assassinated, as we know, in New York City by a Muslim gunman. And so the idea was, if we deport all the, if we withdraw the Jewish forces or the Israeli forces from Gaza, then what we are left with is the Muslims in Gaza, without Jewish settlements and Jewish settlers being harassed and being in trouble. The same philosophy in the West Bank. If the Gaza experiment had worked, the next thing to do was to withdraw from parts of the West Bank, which again, with the goal of withdrawing into a Jewish state and maintaining a Jewish state. You understand what I'm saying? So I'm not in favor of departing and giving up the West Bank. That's a mistake, because the West Bank of Israel is clearly the West Bank of Israel. Jerusalem is on the West Bank. Beit Lechem is on the West Bank. Okay, Hebron, the first capital of Israel, is on the West Bank. So when it comes to the West Bank, there's no ifs, ands, or buts. Bad idea to withdraw. So Sharon had an idea, let's make an experiment. And the experiment was, well, let's protect the identity of a Jewish state by preserving its predominantly Jewish population. Now, Sharon, of course, we all know what happened to Sharon, right? He had a stroke, and he went into a coma, and he's still in a vegetative state. Still alive, the last time I heard, last time I checked. And so his successor, Omer, basically wanted to follow the same policies. But over the course of the last year, they started using it as a terrorist launching pad to fire missiles and Katyusha rockets and other things into Israel. So now, instead of the Jewish people retreating into Israel and allowing this wasteland, this densely populated wasteland, to be part of a future Palestinian state, it turned out to be a terrorist base against Israel. So, the first mistake, in retrospect, obviously, all this is in retrospect. The first mistake was pulling out of the Gaza Strip. We didn't know it at the time, but it was a mistake because it opened up the Gaza Strip as a terrorist launching pad against Israel. So it was a mistake, but at the time we didn't know it was a mistake. But in retrospect, it was a mistake. So they got one terrorist launching pad there against Israel. And then of course, the elections. Now here's the problem, and as I was sharing this with Rivka the other day. Here is the problem with democracy in the Arab world. It doesn't work. Because according to the Quran, Allah has to be in charge. In order for Allah to be in charge, there have to be strong men in charge who inflict the will of Allah upon the people. So democracy works for one election. We've seen that now in the West Bank and Ramallah and all those areas. And we've seen that in Lebanon, where there was a freely elected government in Lebanon, and lo and behold, it didn't matter because after there was a free election and they elected a prime minister, the Syrians didn't like the prime minister, right? So the Syrians assassinated the prime minister, right? Okay, so democracy doesn't work in the Arab world. It cannot. In order for democracy to take hold, it has to be blessed and it has to be accepted from generation to generation. You understand? Why is America free? Why are we a democracy? Because it lasts from generation to generation. Okay? It's not an experiment that lasts for one generation or one election. Now, the problem with imposing democracy on the Middle East, which is what George Bush has tried to do, and again, like Sharon, his plan was noble, and his plan was meritorious, it was told. The problem in wanting people to be free, and that's not a problem, it's a good thing, in wanting people to be free, right? And why shouldn't Muslims enjoy the same freedom that Jews and Christians and other cultures have? The problem is they don't want it because they cannot have Sharia law or Islamic law in charge in a democracy. Now, the problem with bringing democracy to the Arab world or to the Muslim world is what's created this current situation. We had an election, we had democracy in the West Bank, and the Palestinian Authority under Mahmoud Abbas was voted out, and Hamas was voted in, which shows you that democracy can only last one election in the Muslim world, because as soon as you give them the freedom to vote, they're going to vote the tyrannical reign and despotism in, and they're going to vote the liberal and the freedom fighters, they're going to vote them, those who are more open to negotiations with Israel, they're going to vote them what? Out. So do they have democratic elections in the West Bank? Yes. And what happened? They voted the terrorists in, those who wanted the ultimate destruction of Israel. The Palestinian Authority at least feigned negotiations with Israel. They at least were willing to sit at the same table, even though they didn't really want Israel to exist, but at least they were recognized the fact that Israel did exist. So we had a democracy, we had an election, and lo and behold, the Palestinian people wanted someone to represent them who was dedicated to the complete destruction of the nation of Israel, in the land of Israel. So that's why democracy can never work. It'll work in Iraq for one or two elections, and as soon as the U.S. pulls out, guess who's going to be voted in to that election, to the following election? Another Sharia law government that's going to become another Islamic fundamentalist republic joining Iran, just like Iran is a fundamentalist Islamic republic. So the democracy cannot survive, unfortunately, as we've seen in the Muslim world. The first election is usually the last election. And so the policy of Sharon, the policy of Bush, which was democratization and maintaining the identity of the Jewish homeland and not having millions of Muslim citizens in the Jewish homeland, was good in principle, but in actuality, it has created this vacuum of power. Now, what's happening here, I believe you have to understand, is all the pieces being set in place for the final battle of Gog and Magog, which, as I said earlier, is how many parts? 2 parts. right? Before the millennium, part one, and after the millennium, part two. So we have two parts to Gog and Magog. And I think that all these pieces are coming into play. And this is a major battle of World War III. I mean,